You don't think the big capital arose before the government?
What are we doing here? No, I mean, defending big government is like defending death and taxes. When was the last time he met anybody who was in favor of big government?
Today I met Bob Lukacs.
With discrimination.
Not per se. You're in favor of functions.
I make a living by making distinctions, after all. Certainly not without qualification.
You often use the floor.
What I was going to say is, I think most of us are not in favor of big government as a theory. The question that keeps haunting me here is, how do you, going back to your question of just the monetary regulation, how do you make, and let's assume that you can really, we'll go a step further and we'll say, we'll go all the way with you, we will install that mechanism. What makes you think that when the storms arise, that the people running that mechanism are not going to misread just as they did in the past?
Because I'm going to have, if I had my way, I would have a mechanism which didn't require them to read anything.
In other words, simply a money formula.
Absolutely.
It is cranked out in relation to the GNP regardless.
Right.
The question is, how are you going to keep them tampering with this black box? That you have a thing...
I'm not going to have a black box. I'm going to have a very visible system. I've written out, as you know,
I know.
developed at great length the precise details of what I would do.
It will calculate this, but then there's going to be someone who'll come in, the people that you dislike will say, but we could do it a little bit better by doing it this way or that way.
Of course.
How will you keep them from doing it?
Well, in the only way in which you can do it in a democratic society, by establishing both a written and an unwritten, and the unwritten is just as important as the written, an unwritten constitution on the part of the public at large, an acceptance of the view that this is not what people in government ought to be doing.
It's a sacred measure.
Well, if you want, but not necessarily sacred in a theological sense.
No, but unfair criticism. Professor Friedman says he's a bad doctor because people won't actually take his medicine. I mean, that is not fair. But it does seem to me, and I say it again, that to reduce the whole debate to one, are you in favor of big government or small government, as though that was the only interesting or important political economic choice we had to make, is very foolish.
That is very foolish.
And if you put it in that form, in practice in democratic societies, people will go on backing, supporting, and paying for big government. Because unless you, in addition to pointing out the errors, defects, weaknesses, fallibilities, and failures of government, you also describe in some detail and with some attraction the other changes that you're going to make in the non-governmental sector of the economy, which are going to give people the kind of protection, the kind of opportunities, the kind of fulfillment, the kind of stability, the kind of prosperity that they want. They are not going to buy it because you're offering them in a pig in a poke, and they will see it, whether or not you approve of the phrase or whether or not I approve of the phrase, as going back to something which they're glad to have got away from.
The question of how you draw the lines and where you draw the lines is a difficult one, and I can't see any possible way of somehow making a decision on that that will stand like the Rock of Gibraltar against all comers.
I don't think that the public is going to, nor should it, choose ideologically. I think it's going to favor and disfavor certain activities of government out of its experience, by its perception of what's good in its own interests and so on. And I don't preclude the possibility that there will be a different mixture of perceptions by the public, which will lead to a shift in the functions of government. But I think it's at least as possible that after the shift occurs, government will be perceived to have more functions as that it will have fewer functions.
It seems to me also that you could have the monetary policy that you're talking about and have the very big HEW, etc., and more easily.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Now, could you dilate on that?
No,
I meant it, seriously.
I agree with you. I agree with Nick. So these are separable issues. And Peter J. will agree with that, too. In fact, he and I are in almost complete agreement on the desirable monetary policy. Where we differ is on these other policies. And there is certainly no doubt that you could have an essentially automatic stabilizing monetary policy of the kind which I've suggested, of a fixed rate of monetary growth, no discretionary intervention for cyclical purposes, and at the same time have a very big government on HEW, have all sorts of regulation, have tariffs and all other things. With respect to Peter J.'s more general statement, it's impossible not to agree with his statement because it concentrates on objectives and not on means. And the real issue has to do with means. What are the most appropriate and effective means which will give people the greatest assurance. You can't give them certainty, but the greatest assurance that they will have a reasonably stable society with opportunity for themselves.
There we will end the discussion for this week, and we hope you'll join us again in the next edition of Free to Choose.
Of course.
Next week, does the government's welfare system really help the poor and needy, or is it a scandalous waste of taxpayers' money? Is HEW an instrument of a compassionate society, or is it the symptom of an over-governed bureaucratic jungle? Don't miss Part 4 of Free to Choose next week.